Welcome to DXgov governance discussion for Wednesday, June 9th, 1500 UTC. Starting first with the proposal roundup, a couple exciting, or I guess busy days of proposals here. We'll start with Mainnet first, which I will share my screen for that. And so we have a couple actually pending execution proposals, mostly because gas has boosted up the last couple of days. But we have a very exciting ENS update proposal, this one to the DXgov landing page. Keenan, I don't know if you had any special words to say about this particular proposal or the new landing page.
Yeah, just a little quick thing. Actually, a very simple change. A lot of it's just kind of content, priority, and making sure all of our links are working right. We did have quite the struggle to get this through. I think we had a couple various different problems. We had hashing problems. We had a couple problems with the build once it was ready. But everything's solved. You can test this build on dxvoice.eth now if you wanted to. Otherwise, keep an eye out in 2 days for the update to dxgov.eth.
There you go. Cool. Yeah, and this is another, I think we're about one or two of these ENS proposals a month is cool there. And then we have two other proposals on Mainnet. One is a Mainnet rep sync for Melanie. So Melanie, of course, has earned this rep from all these proposals, past proposals from Gnosis chain. And then this is a rep sync, I think, for, about 1.9% of Mainnet rep there. And then the last proposal that I think still needs a pending boost is the first of four proposals to fulfill the previously passed Signal proposal about staking 2,000 ETH with StakeWise. So I think this sends 500 ETH to the ETH relayer for the multi-sig there. And so that actually needs another transaction there to go in the boost, and then that will need to be voted on over the next 7 days. And I think that's go for it.
I was just going to say the boost transaction has actually already been submitted. It's just in the mempool due to gas being a bit crazy today.
Yeah, gas is it's gone up a bit, and then it's also it's like more volatile. So I think getting those under 50 transactions maybe is not as true right now. That's it for Mainnet there. And then moving on to Gnosis chain, where you can see we have a lot of different activity here, and actually try to divide it up into the different kind of things. So of course we have 3 buyback proposals. These are still ongoing. You can see 207, 208, 209 there. We have 6 proposals that are currently in the pending boosting phase. They were staked on yesterday. These are old schemes that are registered with DXgov on Gnosis chain, but have not been used in a long time. Some of these you could see were like, for instance, the wallet scheme was something we had the DXgov team had toyed around with a couple months ago, but is no longer as used. Some of these are actually back from the original deployment time there. So this is, I think we're calling it spring cleaning here. And so, these would deregister these unused schemes on Gnosis chain. This was submitted by Augusto, and then I staked on it. Candy Fork staked on it yesterday. There are also some corresponding mainnet proposals that have been submitted, but have not been boosted yet, also primarily because of some of the gas of the last couple days. So those are the deregistered, or maybe unregistered schemes is probably a better way of saying that. And then, we have these swapper farming proposals here. So these are ones for the next 2 epochs over 4 weeks. They, I believe, are actually going to be passed, I think, in the next day there. Keenan has been working on this, and there's some Arbitrum ones we'll get to in a second. But you can see, that's all of these proposals going through the multi-call scheme there. Yeah, and then we had, I guess, just 5 other current, maybe just call them other proposals. One is an additional scope for the audit of DX governance contracts by Team Omega, and then the audit of the Curve Wrapper contract for Swapper by Team Omega. So these are 2 additional add-ons, both for $4,000 to Team Omega, who's been working on both the on a lot of the auditing stuff for there. And then there's Adam Zod and Guerra P contributor proposal. Guerra P has been doing some good stuff on DX stats. And then the DX Paris contributor stipend proposal was just boosted and is ready to be voted on there, which gives some stipends for contributors interested in attending ECC. And that is it for Gnosis chain. We are having some problems kind of accessing Gnosis chain base right now. Alchemy is the subgraph needs to be resynced, and DXvote, depending on the RPC you use, is kind of like loading differently on Gnosis chain. But yeah, we're trying to work on that and following the other proposals there, but that might be difficult for the next couple hours here. Cool. And then, any questions on Gnosis chain? Just moving to Arbitrum, where, we actually are also dealing with a bunch of farming proposals that, we have a couple last second things we're working on that we'll get those executed there. But these are for the upcoming farming campaigns that would launch tomorrow. So a lot of proposals to get those ready and going. And that's it for the proposal roundup. Any comments, thoughts on any of the live proposals?
Just that the audit reports in those payment proposals have been delivered, as Adam and Ross could attest, and will be shared more widely once the teams kind of process the feedback.
Cool. Yeah, and I voted on those this morning, actually, too. That was the...
Having a little... I don't know. I guess it's maybe RPC issues, having trouble getting information off of Gnosis chain.
On Gnosis chain,
Yeah, we'll look into it a little more.
Adam would like to speak.
Yeah, so just on the Gnosis chain, it seems to be like there was an issue with the graph RPCs. I think they were just using the default one. I pinged them, I believe it was on Monday, because our subgraphs were behind by 1 basis point. And they looked into it. Seems to be fine, but we can look into it if other people are having issues as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and then just 2 discussion items for the day. I guess the big one we'll get to in just a minute is the Karpatkey DAO Treasury proposal. But just kind of quickly on DXD vesting proposals, these have been coming through. I think there's been 2 so far that have come through, and then Augusto is also working on one there that I think will be posted pretty soon. So I wanted to just kind of, I thought maybe it'd be helpful to like set a template that others could follow for Candy Forks vested DXD, which is also coming. So I just posted this in the forum and plan to make this as a proposal here. And you can see here, it's just like a pretty basic format, but the key thing hopefully we can do is this, including, I think the key thing is including a link to both a spreadsheet that shows how you're calculating this, the proposal that you're referencing. So if that's the approved DXD vesting distribution one, or if you have some updates to it like Augusto does, where his are actually incorrect there and are corrected from his original worker proposal, but you want to include those links there. And I also think it's actually helpful to have a picture, because pictures can go into proposals and people can read them if they're too lazy to look at the spreadsheet. But then the spreadsheet actually could calculate that there. And then on this spreadsheet, I'll share this, or you can see this from there. I have all of the award amounts from the proposal that passed there already copied into here. So if you were one of a contributor who received or should have received compensation for the DXD, you can kind of reference where you want here and then just like copy your amount right onto this one. And it should change everything to the right amount, and using like whatever date it is here to get how much of your DXD awards have been vested right now. So yeah, that's in the forum there. And then yeah, just last thing I did do actually was I did link the original worker proposals, because again, it gets always like helpful for people that want to evaluate this and verify that. So yeah, I don't know if there's any feedback on this now or maybe in the forum to make this a little clearer. But then yeah, I would be happy for others to maybe, if they needed a guide or a template, that this might be one to use. Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, then next up on the agenda is the Karpatkey DAO Treasury Proposal. So yeah, we want to just turn it over to you guys, or do you need an introduction? Yeah, why don't you just, Fasu, go for it.
Yeah, so we saw a couple of comments in the proposal, very interesting ones, and we will reply later today. But we wanted to talk about what we have posted, like the idea that we have for DXgov. So we have been managing the treasury of Gnosis for over 1 year now. Our assets under management have been of an average of $550 million in different tokens. And what we would do for DXgov would be similar. First, we would have to diversify the treasury without selling DXT, because doing so would reduce the price. So in order to get a hold of other tokens, we would resort to token swaps with other DAOs. We would take care of the postings in their governance, in their forums and snapshots, if they use snapshot. We would do OTC deals, and we would also advocate to have the DXT token accepted as to take loans as a collateral in different protocols such as Aave, for example. So that way we could take loans and leverage them, getting, of course, a higher yield than what the loan costs. So that would allow us to start having like a snowball of profit for DXgov without exposing the token to a reduction in the price. And the way in which we would currently do so is something which was mentioned by a comment from Sky, and that is we would use a multi-signature wallet that would require at least one trusted signer from DXgov side. So Karpatkey would never hold custody of the funds. We would not be able to do any transactions unless one or more trusted signers from DXgov confirm the transaction with their wallets. So there are pros and cons to that approach. The benefit of that is agility. It allows us to react very quickly. We have, for example, an emergency protocol that lets us, when our system detects that there's a trend in the market, like a potential depegging, for example, of a stable coin, we can react pretty quickly, as we did on May 12th, when there was this market crisis, the last one, which resulted in zero loss for Gnosis. Whereas if we used a system that was like managed in a decentralized way, that would have the downside of being slow and not allow us to react properly, in a timely manner in this type of situations. And also the way in which we work allows us to modify the strategy. We have a strategy team that is constantly researching and puts together a strategy that our execution team carries out. So before each transaction is executed, the execution team makes sure that all the underlying assumptions behind each of them is still valid. So, for example, if there's a significant price impact, if there's impermanent loss exposure, if there was a hack, if if anything happens that makes the transaction no longer in the best interest of DXDAO, they would notice and they would correct before executing. Whereas having a scripted system where we just load a series of transactions and execute them would not have that intelligence, between quotes. So what we could do for you is just manage the treasury the same way we do for Gnosis, so that you can focus on your core business. Our ultimate goal would be that DXDAO can cover all its operating expenses with the yield that the treasury will generate. And the DXD token also, its value should be increased. That would be one of our goals in the midterm. And well, those are the two main goals, like having a valuable token, a valuable DXD token, and allowing you to forget about the treasury and just have enough tokens to fund whatever you need to do with your operation. I don't know if you would like me to go through each of the items that Sky mentioned. It was a very interesting comment. We will reply, as I mentioned today, to each of the things that were mentioned in that comment. But we're open to any questions that you might have on what we are proposing that we can reply now.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions now, or maybe kind of taking a step back at, because I think there's Karpatkey kind of comes at it, and there's the way that Karpatkey works and how Karpatkey is operating. But then there's like kind of DXDAO's structure that is very unique and different and kind of operating within that. So I think right now, DXDAO, the entire treasury is managed through governance, and we've been doing some really interesting things through that. Obviously, the first thing we did was diversify the treasury pretty effectively over the last year and a half. This is where the stable coins come in, the different ones. And then next, we have been doing different relayer contracts that allow us to do those treasury moves that you're talking about, but do them through governance. And then the third thing we've done is we've done like a DXD buyback program that has increased the value of DXD and kind of like accomplished that. So we don't actually yet, in terms of like the DXD component, like DXD is kind of in a much different position than a lot of the other tokens out there. And so I think what this proposal is trying to do is, for me, is start the move towards more sophisticated types of treasury management that can be built using the same type of decentralized, autonomous structures that that DXDAO has already kind of pioneered there. That takes a while to get there because this is complicated stuff in terms of like the transactions that Karpatkey is running for Gnosis. There's a lot of ones that are rebalancing there. But ultimately, like that's to me like the big prize, and really I think the focus actually of DXDAO in like our day-to-day business is building DeFi and DAO tooling. So figuring out a way to get this treasury management integrated into the DeFi, into our DeFi product suite, figuring out how to get this into Swapper and to have like increasing volume, increasing TVL on Swapper, while also getting integrated into our DAO governance suite is really core to what is kind of like the interest of DXDAO here. Getting a yield is also like important. Like that's also nice, as you said. Like there's a desire to maybe where that yield, of course, could pay for operations in different amounts, right? So right now there is some yield on the treasury, but just the size of it could do that. But I think the core business of DXDAO is building DeFi and DAO tooling, and I think treasury management is going to be at the center of it. And so I think this represents an opportunity, I think, with Karpatkey to like take maybe some of the investment sophistication that you guys have and incorporate into that. So there were, I guess, a couple. Sky had a post that was really great that ran through some things there. But there are, I guess, two things that DXDAO would be doing. There are a couple of things that DXDAO would be doing that would be like new, right? So the first thing is this use of a multi-sig, right? And so maybe for Karpatkey, it's not a big deal to, there would only be one Karpatkey person. But for the rest of DXDAO, this introduces a whole new trust mechanism, or I guess trust assumption, where certain individuals, certain signers will have a much larger control of the treasury than they have had before. So that's just a big step that I think it's important to talk about and to think about. And then the second thing is, like you mentioned, around DXD, and you kind of talked a lot about the DXD components there. But DXD we've had a long history with DXD in terms of what DXDAO's kind of approach to market making would be. And since really inception, the approach has been very much hands off. DXDAO has not provided liquidity on DXD. DXDAO has kind of, obviously there's been a buyback program that has repurchased some DXD, but there has not been any of that. And so making sure that that's something that the community is comfortable with, I think, is also important. Yeah. And so those are kind of just, I think, the two new things from there. And so I don't know, maybe a couple other responses to that from the DXDAO community, and then we can kind of hear your guys' perspective.
And just adding on to the DXD liquidity, it might be obvious, but just to make it clear, like I think the main hang up for DXDAO, like when we talked about providing liquidity, is that it's equivalent to selling more DXD, right? So you're like putting more DXD on the market. And at least in terms of the ETH price, DXD has for a while been below what it was sold at, like towards the end of the bonding curve. So like I don't know if you're familiar with the bonding curve, but that's like how DXD was issued. And like the top price was about 1 Ether per DXD in 2020. So, it dropped all the way to 0.1. And so when we were discussing providing liquidity, that's like a pretty steep discount from what the last investors effectively were paying through the bonding curve. And, that's why we have the buyback and stuff like that as well. So just to kind of like add some color around why DXDAO has not provided liquidity yet, because the capability is there with the relayer. It just has been a decision to not do it due to the price, basically. Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, we would go with whatever you prefer. If you prefer to not touch the DXD, we of course would not touch it. We would have our suggestions and the arguments behind them, but it's up to the will of the DAO at the end of the day. We would just, within the boundaries that you set for us, we would get the most out of the treasury. You could, of course, there was one interesting part of the comment that said, what's the difference between like staking it and leaving it there and getting like a 4% yield and having a professional treasury manager in the picture? But it's not only about the yield. Like 1 percentage point in your case would be around $730,000. So each percentage point counts. But I think the main benefit of the kind of treasury management we would do is the level of diversification that we would achieve with the treasury, which would reduce the risk, because anything you do would have the inherent DeFi risks of, I don't know, a smart contract hack. There's a number of things that could happen. And if there's an issue with one of your positions, with your, for example, staking, and that position is compromised by a hack, for example, then you would lose the entire position. Whereas if you have a significant diversification, then you de-risk the strategy and the losses are reduced. Like the maximum damage is reduced, and it would never be like a catastrophic blow for the treasury, So that's something else that I think would be a significant benefit for any DAO.
Also, regarding the liquidity of adding liquidity to DXDAO, when we create a pool and we add liquidity to DXD, we're not just selling DXD, we're also buying DXD. So we're on both sides. So essentially, we're just protecting the price. And this is really the only way you can back the token. And nobody's more interested than the DXDAO to back and protect the price. So I think there are several advantages of having a very deep liquidity with the DXD.
Yeah, and so maybe it's like helpful to think about like what's the comparison, and like Fasu, you were talking about like diversification away from a potential like risky pool. But I guess if you look at kind of what DXDAO's current treasury capabilities are, like we have a diversified treasury that's invested into Swapper, and for right now, it's been pretty conservative and has not gone to those risky things. So we're actually not really at risk of those things you mentioned now until DXDAO would make the decision to enter more higher yielding, more risky investments. Like right now, that's not where the DAO is. So we're kind of coming from really like what could be done in the existing like treasury capabilities there. And so maybe it would be like, especially if you use DXG as an example, like what would Karpatkey be different than say DXDAO supplying liquidity on the DXD WETH pair, on Swapper, on Mainnet, Gnosis chain, and Arbitrum of like, $1 million, and using the existing relayer and the existing governance process like to do that. Because like that's something we could do now if there was a will amongst DXDAO governance to be liquidity providers on those. And so like what would Karpatkey's management of that be? How would that be different than simply using the existing relayer structure?
Well, there's a number of things. First, well, the level of complexity and diversification would be increased. Then we would advocate for DXDAO with different protocols to be able to use DXD as collateral, as I mentioned, to be able to get a hold of stable coins that would generate its own yield for extra diversification token-wise of the treasury. Then we would help positioning DXDAO in the ecosystem in general. I mean, there should be, we believe, a significant number of pools. There should be available liquidity of the token to make it a token of choice, to make it a token that is like at the top of the ranks that people want to hold, which also has the effect of making the DAO like better positioned in the market, more widespread and better known for the ecosystem in general. And then what I was mentioning of the risk, we have the emergency protocol that I mentioned, and we are constantly researching and checking how sound the current positions are, if we need to change them. A couple of times a week, we rebalance the treasury. We abide by the risk profile we would have. We would be very risk averse. We would have a very low exposure to impermanent loss. And we would use a significant number of different protocols. So, as I mentioned, if only one position is compromised, that would be a limited damage to the treasury. It wouldn't have a very significant effect in the treasury overall. So
there are also some things that is not just adding liquidity, like for example, carry trade with loan management. This is something that DXDAO is not doing right now. Also, well, these token swaps, but also evaluate how to use this, how to use your tokens into other protocols. So our core business is finances. So this is very, very important. Our core business is not what you're doing, building toolings, and you're going to excel in this, and maybe we can also work together and offer this maybe to other DAOs.
So
it's not just the execution, right?
Right. The yield we got with the Gnosis treasury has been greater than the yield of all the rest of the DAOs put together. We reached like a 51% yield with Gnosis alone. And we are not chasing yield because we are very conservative with the positions we create and the way in which we manage the tokens. But the thing is that the management is very active. We are constantly optimizing the yield within the risk range in which we work.
Is there a due diligence process on adding new strategies? Like, are you actually looking into the security of the smart contracts, like doing, at least like reviews of the audit reports or something like that?
Yes, we review the audit reports. Whenever the research team finds a new protocol, they have a sub-protocol they have to follow. And the smart contracts, one of the requisites is that the smart contracts have been audited by a third party, by a reputable third party. And there's a series of other things. We have a very tight security protocol, which makes the execution meetings very boring because there's a lot, there's a compromise between convenience and security. So we have to make sure that the addresses are correct. We have to speak out loud what we are about to do. So we are sure that the trusted person holding the ledger, the hardware wallet, is doing what they are saying they will do. We have a panic phrase in case somebody is coerced or there's some security issue. It's just a casual phrase, and then when it's pronounced, when it's mentioned, then we discontinue the call with an excuse. And yeah, we're pretty strict about security because there's too much at stake. Like so far, we haven't made a single mistake, and everything we do is double checked. We have at least 2 people in the execution meetings that are checking every transaction we make. So yes.
So regarding the smart contract audits, so we have a small tech team. We have 3 devs, where they're mostly focused on anti-liquidation bots, keepers, and we don't have a smart contract auditors internally. So far, we've been doing this with the internal team at Gnosis. So this would be the smart contract risk. What we do is the financial risk. This is something we have a small team of research. This is something we definitely do, this risk management. So for a smart contract, it's either we've been doing so far these internal audits, but mostly our conditions are we don't deploy funds if the smart contracts have been battle tested and audited by these reputable companies. So this is mostly our workflow.
So what the anti-liquidation bots have allowed us to do is to increase the capital efficiency by minimizing the collateral we lock, to get loans. And they are working constantly, so they give us early alerts in case we need to increase the collateral, and we have never had a single liquidation so far.
Yeah, maybe just a brief description of, I think, like the very simple concept of a carry trade, right? So this is kind of what probably is like the core of a lot of like the yield that Karpatkey is generating. So basically, you deposit ETH, something is collateral, you get a loan out in a stable coin, so you're paying an interest rate on that loan, but you were able to get a yield on that stable coin that is higher than the amount that you're paying in interest on the loan. So say you take that stable coin and you go invest it and you get 5%, and your loan is charging you 2%, like you were just making a nice little 3% profit there. And so for most of and then the key thing, as you mentioned, you need to manage those. Of course, you are borrowing against your Ether, right? Or against whatever collateral. So you do need to make sure that you're managing the risk of that. Because of course that's where the risk comes from. Sky, you had a pretty good post, I think, about running through a couple different questions and comments and things. And so I don't know if you wanted to ask anything specific, or we could run through some of the questions that you had raised.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for joining in. So, obviously, you've seen that a few of the big things are really factors that DXDAO as a community needs to figure out in order to move this forward. But the ones specific to probably Karpatkey more would be this kind of what was it? What did I call it? Size of yield. So so in the current market, right? We the question is, what kind of yield do you guys think that is possible versus the alternative? So there's the risk reward there, because there's a lot that would go into this. And then once we define what that work and what that risk reward is for what potential increased yield, then there's the question of if we want to start doing something for Karpatkey, but we are not comfortable with DXDAO as a DAO turning over X millions of dollars to a small set of people, whether that is DXDAO people and Karpatkey people, or just a third party or something, which we've had other discussions with other kind of investment advisors and stuff as well. But that was like full custodial, which is not ideal either. But this would be like semi-custodial. The question is how, because with Gnosis, like you have a $550 million like mass that you're working with to like diversify, and a lot of that's not in ETH. It's just all these different tokens, which DXDAO up to this point, has diversified into dollar stable tokens and a few other very specific tokens that it wanted to hold, but it has chosen not to diversify into lots of different tokens on purpose. So if we wanted to do that, we could also start to do that. So like is there some minimum amount? I know in the proposal is proposed $10 million, but is that the minimum that you would be able to start doing some kind of work on? Because there's a lot of work that goes into this. Or could it start smaller so that we could start this relationship, and then we could also concentrate on the other important things that we really want, is how can we actually do this all with a guy like an active manager like you, but where DXDAO really still has custodian of the funds. So yeah, those are some of the most important questions, I guess, would be specific to you guys.
Right. So with our current structure, the minimum thresholds we actually are working with are $50 million equivalent in tokens. We would be willing to start with a lower figure for DXDAO, so you can you feel comfortable with us. We set a precedent. You see how we work. But after around 6 months, we would probably post another proposal to expand the amount to at least 50 million, and eventually, ideally, we would need to handle the entire treasury to have a greater, to have more options, more investment options with it. So currently,
when you say 50 million, like, are you working with any other DAOs besides Gnosis DAO? And I guess that one's 500 million. So I guess like, yeah, I mean, like when you're saying, where did that number come from if Gnosis DAO is kind of the only one that you guys have been working with?
Yeah.
And maybe what are some other DAOs that would be potential candidates that would have this large of treasury on chain, unmanaged, that, already diversified, right? Any other candidates in that?
So other candidates, like Lido is one other candidate we're working with right now, but we are currently growing our structure that will be present in the proposal, and we have run the figures, and we have set that minimum of 50 million based on our cost structure. So I figure lower than that, the amount of work that requires to manage the treasury the way we do would, in the long term, not make it worthwhile with a smaller treasury. But as I was mentioning, we are willing to start smaller for a period of time of around 6 months to see if we feel comfortable and if we like the way in which we work. And eventually, after around half a year, we would post another proposal and ask the DAO if they would be willing to increase the treasury size. And in parallel, we are working with the development team on a plugin to the Gnosis Safe that would allow for decentralized management that would not require a trusted signer from DXDAO. So you could vote on a strategy with a set of parameters, and if each and every transaction we would make after that vote would only be executed if it's within what the DAO has voted. So at that stage, that wouldn't require a setup with trusted signers on your behalf. It would be trustless for the execution. So that has pros and cons, but that is something we're working on, and that's something to which we are aiming currently. The DApp already exists, and we are providing feedback to the team. It would take us several months of tests and finally a couple audits of a third party before we can announce or start using it in a productive environment like on Mainnet, Gnosis chain, Polygon, etc. But that is within our roadmap, and that is what we are aiming.
So yeah, this is not a promise, right? We have a pilot that right now is working with some private funds. We are doing it on. We have this management safe on Gnosis chain, where we have this whitelisted set of smart contracts, and we can all interact with this. And also, if our goal, of course, is to minimize any kind of trust assumption. For the moment, I'm not very concerned. I know you're not. I know these trust assumptions are an issue for DXgov. I think that the risk of collusion for so many people that also from different organizations is minimal. So I think it's okay, at least for a few months. But I agree we need to change if we want to continue expanding our scope. And I really think it makes sense to have a centralized risk management of the whole portfolio. So eventually this is our goal, to be able to manage the whole portfolio, hopefully in the future.
Would you guys be able, like, do you have some kind of principles or like factors that have allowed like Karpatkey and Gnosis, and I know Karpatkey kind of comes from the Gnosis family, right, originally, and now it's kind of operating separately, but
yeah,
like $550 million that was controlled by Gnosis DAO, but you could say that's a large, maybe multi-sig, but it was controlled by the Gnosis DAO, and now that money is being controlled by, like, let's say 4 people. How does Gnosis DAO get comfortable with taking on with that new risk for a scenario like this? Like, because that's what we would need to get DXDAO community and DX dealers comfortable with. And we to imagine the size of that number in the hands of 4 people, it just seems a totally different risk than having like treasury in an actual DAO, right? So
right.
if you have factors that you can help us, that why Gnosis DAO and you guys are comfortable with that we could use for our community, then it would help us kind of sell it internally almost.
Makes sense. That's actually a really good question.
You need to delegate a trusted or a few trusted signers from the to some trusted member. Still, of course, this member would not be allowed to remove funds, and we also would not allow them to do this, right? So this is why you need to have so many parts, so many malicious parts to have collusion, right? This is why.
Yeah. So the risk is reduced when you add more people to the equation, because we would all have to come to an agreement to steal the money basically and run away with it, which would result in Karpatkey disappearing. The people that Gnosis DAO delegates the signatures to are very trustworthy for them, of course, and they know all of them personally, so they know where to send the hitman in case something happens. But it's basically a matter of trust and a matter of numbers of how many people
it can be like, it's not so much about the risk. I think it's also about like how it changes the power structure, I think, a little bit, kind of acknowledging that. Like, so for Gnosis, like whoever those individuals are that are on that like wallet, like they are more powerful, like in the ecosystem. People will kind of respond to them differently. So there's a lot of different like components, I think, when we think about this, when it comes to like who is ultimately in control of the funds, that I think have ripple effects through other areas. But again, this is like, I don't know, this is like a big issue. We have like the long-term one there. I don't know, other questions maybe from
this is very important. Like this signer works more as an auditor, is not a decision maker. So the delegation is for Karpatkey. We make decisions, and this additional signer acts as an auditor. So this is important to mention, I think.
Yeah, they control everything we do basically, and we act on the DAO's best interest because that's our business, like what we do for a living.
Yeah.
So
And I think
just
sorry, Sky, just like I think that treasury management is like a very important area of development for DAOs. And so I very much want to see a relationship like work out here. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to like work through a lot of these. You know, we have a lot of questions, obviously. I would frame it as like DXDAO we're like built as decentralization maximalists, right? So, I mean, I trust you guys. Like, I don't have any problem with you managing. You know, I know, you know, through relationships and everything, I have a high level of trust in Karpatkey. But I think the fundamental structure and purpose of DXDAO is to do things in a way that doesn't require any trust. Like that's the whole experiment that, you know, DXDAO was set up to do at the beginning, and is, I think, a like big purpose that we're serving now. So, I mean, I understand like the fund structures and everything, but in my view, like the value out of this relationship would be establishing like totally new ways to conduct treasury management that actually are trustless, like that can kind of pave the way for DAOs to just like operate in more scalable and decentralized, you know, going back to the decentralized maximalist things. So I think what I would ask, does that seem worth it for you guys? Like, would you want to kind of like work with us to do that, even though
Yes.
it may require a lot more work? We may not trust you with, you know, the full treasury, and, you know, like same on our side, right? We couldn't really promise that in 6 months we'd be comfortable with the whole thing, or even 50 million. But I mean, I like personally, I think it's like a very important direction of exploration, but I think it's probably going to be a little bit of work, right? Like we're going to have to like figure these things out along the way.
Yeah, we are all for decentralization because that's the only way in which we can scale. Like we can't have like 10 more clients if we're doing everything the way we're doing it today. We need tools that are decentralized, that allow the DAO as a whole to make the decisions. There are some cons also to such a structure, because if you show your cards in advance and you tell what the strategy will be, you're exposed into massive front running, because the more people who invest, I mean, the greater the number of investors in a protocol, the smaller the yield in general. So there would be like a trade-off in that sense, but it will be trustless, which is a great like point in favor of it. So to answer your question, yes, we are open to collaborate on decentralization tools. We are working on our own tools right now, and in the long term, we aim to have a semi-automated operation as well. So basically, the DAO would vote on a proposal with the strategy that could have some level of concealment, like of vague statements, like this is the list of protocols that we are authorized to invest in. These are the parameters within we can operate, for example, our collateralization ratio, and that's it. And then the multi-signature wallet would only allow us to work within those pre-authorized parameters. If we try to do something that is out of that list, it would reject the operation. And also, instead of having a manual execution like we currently do, which has, as I mentioned, a significant number of pros, we would be able to just upload the strategy and then run the investments in a scripted way. So that is where we are aiming to go in the long term, because we understand it's the only way to scale in a sustainable way. But we would always offer the service we're currently offering because of the number of benefits it has for whoever is willing to take the risk. Because I understand that, I mean, if I had $73 million, I wouldn't be comfortable just giving it away to somebody that has the power to run away with it. So eventually, it should be trustless. That's where we're aiming.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, at least I think I think a lot of us are believers that this is a huge opportunity, right? Like we've come so far in the last few years in terms of DAOs, how many there are, how much money is locked into it. And I just imagine that, in another 3 years, that number could also like expand, by orders of magnitude again. So I think it's very interesting.
So for us, DXDAO would be great as a client because it would allow us to demonstrate to the ecosystem that we can make treasuries really grow. Like there's a significant qualitative difference and quantitative difference when Karpatkey manages the treasury. So we would like to show charts like the one I will publish in the reply with the before and after, because that would allow us to keep growing, and becoming a trusted treasury manager by more DAOs, but always aiming to a trustless setup and to offer that as a service. As I mentioned, we would probably never stop giving the service we're currently giving because of the number of advantages it has, but also we would be able to cater for smaller DAOs with smaller treasuries and just have a semi-automated operation.
We're coming up on time, and I just wanted to stop to see if there's anyone else that has not gotten a chance to ask a question. Maybe has been sitting on something very juicy and wants to make a comment. Nathan asks, why don't we refocus the collab effort to building the tech first?
Well, there would be a cost of opportunity. We are open to doing that, but until the tech's developed and battle tested, several months would go by in which you would not be getting the yield you could be getting. That's a definite option, but there's a cost.
Yeah, is Mimic? Yeah, I think someone had mentioned that you guys are talking with Mimic and like DHedge and the guys that allow for this kind of copy trading technology, and obviously like different people that want you to manage their money could or their tokens will have different sets of token, but if there was like different strategies, different active strategies that you guys could do through these platforms, and then DAOs could allocate into those, that seems like a very scalable thing. And so that sounds really interesting, and that is in line with what you described as, for you guys to scale, you can't do your different strategies for everyone that's going to let you manage the money. Really, right. You want to come up with awesome strategies and let people allocate into trustless contracts that like mirror your strategies or something, which is the future. Like even in traditional finance, investors in funds do not trust the founders of the funds with a small set of people with the funds. All of the funds sit with a custodian, which is a government regulated custodian that basically can't steal the money. And so even in traditional finance, you don't never trust 5 people with billions of dollars,
True. Yeah, our business model is different from Mimics and DHedge. It's more tailored and it's got a greater human component, and that today I think it's more adequate to the speed at which the DeFi ecosystem moves. If we script something and we battle test it and then we implement it, by the time we do it, probably parameters changed. Many times we had, for example, the strategy finished on a Tuesday morning, and a Tuesday afternoon we were executing and we had to change it because something happened in the market. If we had just gone with the original strategy, we would have lost several $1 million. We were yielding $1.2 million a week at that point of the market. It was not yet the bear market, but this agility can only be obtained like manually, the way in which we work, whereas those solutions just are like a pre-built system, with its pros and cons, but they differ from our business model. And if I had to trust my treasury to a manager, I would like to be preserved from those like market changes that can result in losses.
And I think it's nuanced, but I think agility and trustlessness will like work together. Like as like, for example, I could imagine like there's a liquidity pair where, you know, DXDAO has some money in and the price of something looks like it's going to crash. You know, the money manager like Karpatkey could pull the liquidity before that happens, right? And that still could be considered trustless because like that could be something that was already whitelisted because the DAO knows that it's not damaging. There's nothing malicious can be done simply by pulling the liquidity, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's something we actually have been working on. We have a document with that. But yeah, when we go trustless, we still need to have agility for emergency situations. That's not something that we can lack. So yeah, there would be mechanisms that would allow us to quickly react and be able to prevent significant loss. Yes.
Any other thoughts from people, comments, questions? Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for hopping on. We're right over the hour here. Yeah, I imagine there will be some kind of follow-up thoughts as we let these things ruminate. There's something about even just having this conversation out in the open. I've kind of even got additional thoughts and perspective now from this. So thanks so much for hopping on. Yeah, and there is, I guess in general, if people will have comments or different things, definitely leave them on the forum thread. In terms of like the relationship, there is like a Telegram where some DXDAO contributors are in with Karpatkey, where we're talking about some of these things. So any kind of coordination will be through there. But any comments, suggestions, please add them to the forum.
We'll be happy to reply. We'll reply today to Sky's comment.
Great.
And any others.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and I think we can leave it at there. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.